Hey everybody! Here for another exciting video where we review stuff and things for the Warhammer 40k universe. I've got with me here none other than our favorite constant contributor, Mr. Corkin.
Hello there.
Hey. And we're going to be
So,
talking about some stuff.
specifically, what we're going to be talking about is the big ol' hype on the block, the new faction,
Hmm.
the Leagues of Votann.
The
And
Boogeyman.
specifically, a lot of people have been talking about, oh, these are all the cool combos that you can do with them. This is how exciting they are as a player of Votann. However, a lot of people don't play Votann, and so the question becomes, how on earth do you beat these guys?
Right.
Because they are very, very strong, to be clear. But they are not unbeatable. And we're here to tell you how you can beat them.
Which is something that I think is really needed. Especially, I mean, if you wanted to see it, you can watch me do it live where I react to first hearing about some of Votann's rules. I'm going to put a little video box right over here somewhere.
So, first up, this is not a video about the in-depth rules of Votann, but we want to go into a general summary of how Votann works and what the things are that they do. So, first up, Votann is a insanely powerful ranged army. They have probably the single highest damage output at range of anything in the entire game, especially with anti-tank weaponry, though the judgment tokens mechanic, which we also went over in that previous video, as was linked by Wallace, means that they are good into just about every single unit in the game.
Yep. Uh,
So,
they make the Tau crisis suits kind of look like they got squirt guns instead of plasma rifles when you really put it dice for dice.
yeah. So, all right, they shoot really, really well. That
Hmm.
is the first thing to know about. You you have to accept that for the most part, if you let them shoot you, they will table you in 2 turns, maybe 1 turn.
Yep.
If they will very, very happily, if you let them shoot all of their guns at you every turn, just kill you. That is one of their greatest strengths. They also have a respectable amount of melee damage output. Not an insane amount, but the Chthonian Berserks and some of their characters have excellent damage output in melee. However, they are slow. They are not fast. With a 5-inch move, can only advance 3 inches, which is a big deal. It helps, but it also hurts. And they have no access to advance and charge.
And I think
Now,
there is a few units that are faster though, right? They have a couple of
yes,
things in their book that can actually get in your face pretty quick if they build that way.
there are 3 units that Votann use, and I expect almost all competitive builds to use some of these units, or all of them, that have a considerable amount of mobility. Those are the Land Fortress,
Yep.
which is their giant transport tank, and the thing we made the video about. The Saguitar, a smaller version of the Land Fortress, with less capacity and significantly less powerful guns, but higher speed and a much cheaper price, plus the ability to take significantly more of them. You could see lists running up to 6.
Wow.
Those move 10 inches and 12 inches respectively. They are both transports, and they automatically advance 6 inches and have a stratagem to automatically advance 12 inches. The final unit in their arsenal that is very fast is the bikes. However, the bikes are fairly fragile. They are T5 with a 4-up save and no invulnerable save unless they are Immer, and while they have excellent damage outputs, and they do have the Void Armor rule, they will die fairly quickly. They are very expensive for their wounds, at 30 points for a 3 wound model. A good number of Votann will be using the just slowly move up the board and grind you out, while using bikes as a very fast unit, especially given their pregame move and objective secured,
Mhm.
that can go out, steal an objective, possibly score with one of their secondaries, and then perform some harassment.
Right. I mean,
However,
everything they have is super survivable. Even those transports we mentioned are
yes,
pretty
the
survivable.
transports are incredibly survivable. However, there's one thing let's talk about some of their weaknesses.
Yes.
Oh, first up, their secondary.
Nice.
They have four secondaries, and one of them is very bad, and then three of them are decent. Specifically, we have ourselves a secondary that is the Battlefield Supremacy secondary, Lay Claim, I believe it's called,
Okay.
is set up as you basically place three objectives on the battlefield, all not within 6 inches of their deployments and not within 9 inches of each other, not within six of deployments or battlefield edge. And their opponent is the one who does this. So you, the player, playing against Votann and hopefully crushing them, are the one who will place these objectives.
Well, where am I going to place them?
You play 6 inches outside your deployments, not within nine of each other. You'll find it's fairly constrained, but what you want to do is force them to be close to you. And
Okay.
specifically, ideally, you want to make it so that you can hold them from behind terrain. Votann score 5 points at the end of the game for each of these objectives that they control. There is nothing else.
Okay.
That means it is very simple, and this is one that I expect Votann will take a lot of the time because their other secondary game plan is not great. They have two other secondaries that rely on killing your opponents. Both of their secondaries, Grudge Match and Ancestors Are Watching, both rely on killing opponents as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
Specific this combined with Lay Claim, which is an endgame secondary, and only really is consistent if they're able to rip you off the table, means that they have some impetus to come at you. They are forced into a somewhat aggressive game plan.
Okay. So if they're going to score well against me, they're probably going to take some of their aggressive secondaries. And I'm guessing that other things like banners are going to be pretty consistent for them as well.
Banners are an excellent secondary for them. Better on some missions than others, because, as always, that's how banners work.
Right.
But it is generally a solid secondary due to their ability to get onto objectives, hold objectives, and then make it very difficult for you to take them off of those objectives due to their incredible damage outputs.
So
Some
if,
armies like Harlequins or Sisters can take those objectives from them if they take banners, though.
okay. So if I'm playing against Votann, I definitely want to make sure I have a solid secondary game plan.
Right.
Maybe even one better than them, because it sounds like in order for them to beat me, they got to push into me, which is kind of already what they want to do. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them from like just a thematic standpoint. But what are some of the other weaknesses they have? Because it can't just all be on victory points.
It's not. One of the other giant weaknesses that they have is their mortal wound outputs. Well, specifically, their weakness to mortal wound outputs. They have almost no defenses in the entire book for dealing with mortal wounds. They have a single Psyker, which can deny one power, and they might take one of these because it's useful. They have a way to make it do an action and still cast, and they have at least one power that is very good, just gain a CP.
Yeah, it's like Warp Charge
So,
5 as well.
yeah, Warp Charge 5, gain a CP, it's just fantastic.
Mm.
However, that means that if you that means that combined with that, they don't have many deny the witch attempts. They will have likely one in their entire army and have no stratagems to help assist with that, like Necrons or Sisters would. And in addition, their only other form of mortal wound protection is a 6-up Feel No Pain spell, which is not great for dealing with mortal wounds, and a single stratagem from one of the guilds that you're frankly probably not going to see that is a 5-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds.
Yeah, they do
That
have
is
a 1 CP 5 up Feel No Pain on one unit for one of the guilds, but it's not something you'll see most of
correct.
the time, right? Because it's not on Ymir and it's not on the
Great Arthurian League.
Yeah, Great
Yeah.
Arthurian.
And that's what we expect to be the most popular builds.
Those will be for sure. I think
Yeah,
especially early on before everyone's figured out and solved things, those are going to be what you're seeing on the table across from you. So
I would agree with that. As such, that means that any faction that can do a huge amount of mortal wounds is very well suited to deal with Votann. In addition, two of their very fancy mechanics for saving those land fortresses are change a failed save to damage 0 and make a save a 6 from the Forge Master and Uthar, respectively. That is completely ineffective against mortal wounds.
true.
Which means anyone that can do tons of mortals, excellent spot for dealing with Votann. They don't have great ways to deal with it. So, in terms of weaknesses, we're looking at secondaries. They have to go aggressive at you in order to score secondaries. And if you have a game plan that allows you to sit back and score secondaries very well, you can beat them fairly consistently. Their second one is that they are weak against mortal wounds. And their third main weakness is their speed.
I think I can, point out that one right away. Speed is clearly something that they lack. Now,
yes.
Granted, they have some units that help speed them up. Those transports are definitely going to be mainstays in a lot of lists. But once those transports are gone, and I feel like it's similar to the Orc philosophy, too, if you want to target down a lot of the transports first, just to slow down how fast that wog gets into you. Once they're out of the transports, like the rest of it is just a slowly moving anvil. And we're used to playing against that with things like Death Guard that are also really powerful once they get into you, but it's hard for them to get there. So you can actually use the old measuring tool to figure out exactly where you need to be to make their charges very difficult for them once they're outside of those transports. I think that's pretty big.
Agreed.
So once they start committing their stuff too, it's hard for them to commit more than once to one side of the board.
In addition, they are a faction that is all about shooting, but they're shooting out, they have no way to advance and shoot. As such, if they want to advance one of their land fortresses, that means giving up an entire turn of shooting to do so. As such, and that also likely will put them away from most of their defenses, so they're probably not going to want to do that in many situations, especially if you're an army that can punish that.
And without that advance, it's still only a 10-inch movement, which is not slow by any extent of the imagination, but these aren't the ridiculous movement we might be used to with things like Eldar or Tau, who can get crazy angles on you. It's going to be a lot harder for them to create those opportunities. They'll still try, and they still have units that can, but I feel like that's really nice. Just being able to find positions that you can hide in is going to be so important against them, that the fact that they aren't just also in your face right away is, I think, a very categorically large difference between Votann and Tau when we first experienced them on release, and they were quite powerful. So
yes. Another thing about those transports, you want to help deal with them? Toss just a few chaff infantry 1.1 inches in front of them. Those transports are giants, frankly. They are not a small unit. And as such, they can oftentimes struggle to move around terrain. And if you put a unit directly in front of them, that can just stop them dead in their tracks. The unit will die, but you can slow their movements, and you can make it so that they cannot get to you in time.
Nurglings.
Nurglings. So, after talking about all that, what armies are going to be good into Votann?
So, I think I can think of a few,
3.
too. Yeah, you came up with a good list of 3 that I think are super solid, and I think it's well... it's paying heed to those weaknesses you just mentioned. So, why don't you start us off with the first one you brought up here?
So, the first army that is almost guaranteed to be very strong into Votann is Necrons. They have a combination of 2 things that are really good at dealing with Votann. Specifically, they have a fantastic secondary game plan. And I do mean a fantastic secondary game plan. Anyone who has played against Necrons recently will know they can score up their secondaries super quickly and without needing to do anything to their opponents. This will put Votann under a lot of pressure immediately, combined with especially the OBSEC on everything dynasty, which is the thing that you are currently seeing everyone run.
Right.
If that gets nerfed, then this changes, obviously. All these factions are in their current states. This is before any balanced data, the next balanced data slate, which could change everything. But the general principles that we talked about earlier are still going to be relevant for how you deal with Votann. So Necrons have in addition to their fantastic secondary game plan, they also have the ability to deny the primary of Votann very, very well. Votann are an army with only 2 units that have OBSEC. The bikes, once again, pretty fragile, and their basic troop infantry, also fairly fragile, though a bit less so. If you can run onto an objective and just drop some OBSEC there, which Necrons are very good at doing, you can deny them primary very effectively. And this causes problems for them, as suddenly, yes, they're going to kill pretty much everything, and they may table you, but they're just not scoring. And that is one of the keys to dealing with Votann, and one of the things Necrons are good at.
I played a whole edition of Nothing But Disciples of Bellicor where I would be tabled by turn 4 very consistently, and I would still win the majority of those games. Because there's something about being able to deny your opponent's primary that if you get even just a few turns where they're on 4 and you're on 12, they just can't catch up, even if they do manage to punch you in the face. It's
very, very hard to come back from that.
Yeah.
Especially on a lot of missions.
And with Necron, too, that one of the things that they do super well is not only they have OBSEC everywhere, and they're super fast, and all their secondaries are easy, but the things that have OBSEC also tend to be very cheap and easy to throw away without losing too much of your game plan. So you can throw things like Scarabs onto an objective, or you can put like Tomb Blades onto an objective, steal it away from them, deny them the points, and then yeah, they're going to kill you on the shoot back, and it's going to be grotesque how much they overkill you. But it doesn't really matter. It was 75 points or whatever.
Less than that, 60 points for Tomb Blades.
60 points in the case of Tomb Blades, yeah. And that's just like that's just pure value. So I think you hit it on the forehead. I don't think they're going to necessarily just roll over the current meta, which is very nice to see. What's another good example of a faction that you think will do well?
On a completely different angle to Necrons, another faction that I think will do very well is Thousand Sons. The Thousand Sons are, for anyone who hasn't played against them, Thousand Sons have some of the most impressive mortal wound output that you will find anywhere in this game.
And it's about to get better. It's about to get better.
A lot better. There are some ways that you can soup in Tzeentch units, in particular from Chaos Demons, to take your already impressive damage output and crank it up to the next level, and then the level beyond that.
Yeah, access to Tzeentch Demons means you have access to their incredibly powerful psychic table, and not only do you get the demons that have those powers, something like a Lord of Change or a Fluxmaster can do quite a bit of work, but they also have a Kabbalistic ritual that allow you to double cast a Witchfire cast with one of your Thousand Sun Psychers. So your Tzeentch Demon can come in, and it can cast Infernal Gateway. And Infernal Gateway is a Witchfire. Because Infernal Gateway is a Witchfire, I can use my Kabbalistic Ritual, which is not broken because of the Agents of Chaos keyword, and my Exalted Sorcerer can also then cast Infernal Gateway.
So many mortal wounds.
It's so many mortal wounds, and those mortal wounds can... I mean, I was mathing this out. You very consistently do the 16 wounds needed to kill a land fortress and one psychic phase, and then still will have splash damage left over. I think that's just fantastic. And especially if Thousand Suns start moving to smaller unit sizes, and we're not as committed to something like just a giant 10-man Terminator brick and that being our whole list is just multiples of those. If we go smaller on our unit sizes, we can do that thing we were talking about with Necrons too, send out these little units to go contest objectives, but still dump tons of damage on the things that we do expose to our psychic phase.
In addition, one of their secondaries, Wrath of Magnus, punishes Votann hard if they choose to take their single Psyker, as suddenly you now have access to what is effectively a free 15 victory points on secondary.
Yes, and Wrath of Magnus is going to be about 15 free victory points, outside of you just failing a bunch of malediction casts. But on top of that, it makes their secondary game plan worse because they cannot even think about trying to do anything Warpcraft related. So
trying to do that against the Thousand Suns, it is just not going to work.
Yeah.
You will deny them.
Yeah.
And so their already fairly weak secondary plan suddenly gets worse than it already was, which is very, very problematic for them.
And I'm excited about that as a Chaos player, hearing that I have a Chaos faction that I know has a decent plan into our new dwarf friends is very good for my heart. But outside of this crazy Mortal Wound output and OBSEC shenanigans, what would you say is your third choice here for an example of a faction that'll do quite well?
I would say Harlequins. Harlequins have a few of the things that we talked about earlier, and they do them very well. They have the ability to just throw around OBSEC like it's candy of Necrons, and they have a solid secondary game plan. But they have one other thing going for them, which is very interesting, which is their incredible speed. Is anyone who knows anything about Harlequins can tell you, Harlequins are incredibly fast. They can virtually teleport across the board in a single turn. And this is a huge deal against Votann. Even though their damage output is, frankly, not the best at killing a land fortress, it doesn't matter if you're just able to effortlessly move around and get around them, maybe chuck a single unit in front of the land fortress to move block it for a turn, and murder everything in their back lines in a single stroke.
The thing about Harlequins, too, is they're very hard to play, but they're also very hard to play against. I'm a player with a lot of experience in playing cautious. I play, I think, even overly cautious with a lot of my units. And I had an experience against a very good Harlequin player where just because of their flip belts and their movement, they were essentially able to just leap across the board with one of their troops and get this insane charge and pile in to steal an objective from me that I not in 1,000 years would have even noticed. And the fact that they can do that kind of stuff against a slow-moving army is going to be nuts because, you only hang one unit back on a back objective because you're trying to secure the middle, and suddenly that Harlequin troop comes in there and not only flips the objective but takes out the infantry that's back there. You have to go into a panic scenario where you turn back around and have to send units that way, and it can create a real mess where it's kind of like you're playing whack-a-mole, but the moles have caresses and they do a lot of mortal wounds.
It's pretty much the epitome of what we were talking about earlier. Votann's secondary game plan wants them to be aggressive and pushing up towards you. That is very hard to do against Harlequins, when as soon as you push up towards them, they are suddenly in your back lines and eviscerating you.
And I think you could create a lot of weird situations for their transports as well. Like, discharging from behind cover so there isn't an overwatch into you, and then you just tap that transport and all of a sudden it loses a ton of movement. That's a great game plan. I think it's a hard game plan though for both players. It's hard to play against, but it's also hard to play correctly.
One of the things to establish here, Votann are an incredibly powerful army. These are ways to make your matchups a lot more favored against them, but they are not auto wins by any stretch of the imagination. In order to execute any of these game plans, you will need to play well against Votann. It's not an auto win. But Votann are not unbeatable.
For
And
sure.
that's the point of this.
For sure. And I think if you bear these things in mind, you can look for stuff in your faction, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be any of those three we just listed. And you can try to find the tools that you have that maybe not make you favored into Votann, but make your opportunity to beat them a lot better. If you have tools in your book that allow you to do things like output more mortal wounds, lean more heavily on psychic units, or just find ways in which you can use fast OBSEC to try to create winning positions for yourself, it's going to dramatically increase your ability to maybe not beat the best players in the game playing Votann in most circumstances.
That's going to be hard.
Right. But still play to a tournament quality where you're able to play above most players who are playing Votann, because player skill matters tremendously with any army.
Correct.
So I think that's an important thing to keep in your mind. I can already think of a ton of different ways for myself personally, where I have a ton of lists that I'm like, okay, I need to get this on the table. And I mean, whether you're NIDS and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll try out Zoanthropes or bring in some more gargoyles or whatever that might be to help increase one of these categories. I think just having heed to them is going to really benefit you for the next so many months until Votann either receives some kind of nerf or things adjust in the overall scene. So I think that's super important.
I do as well. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave a comment. I will probably be monitoring them myself, as I want to help people that are really worried about this Votannic menace that seems to be approaching us at an alarmingly rapid pace.
Like, comment, subscribe.